about breadth, that we might have participation in terms of direct work, an operational level and strategic. And overall, I would see the first two presentations you've had, largely but not exclusively, thinking about an operational level and a strategic level. So I'm really pleased to be able to welcome Rivka back to the stage, who's going to talk about a project that was focused more at the level of kind of direct work, her work doing shared decision making in CAMHS.
Thank you. I just wanted to share a couple of other slides that for me have been really helpful in understanding participation. So I can recommend IAP2, the International Association for Public Participation, and their version of the ladder, where inform and consult are no shared decision making, involve and collaborate are shared decision making, and empowering is handing over the decision making. So it's really clear about whether who's holding the power. And also they're very clear about what the promise is in each of those levels. So even if all you can do is tell young people in your service about what you are doing, because you've got no capacity to share any decision making with them, you have a duty to inform them correctly so that they can understand what's happening. So care about the leaflet you produce so that it's actually accessible, so it will be read. It's not that you've produced a leaflet. If it won't be read, you haven't done the job of informing them. So, and I think it also helps to understand the circularity of participation, because of course you could work at empower level to create that leaflet. A group of young people could be given the whole decision-making process to make that leaflet for other young people to understand something about your service that they haven't got any decision-making power over. So I think it's a nice model, and they've got loads of useful ideas on how to go about participating, but also they have a really nice set of key values that are, I think, the other difficulty about understanding participation is that it assumes when you're doing it that you're coming from a value base, and if your value base isn't right, you'll get your participation wrong, which is why we often trip into tokenism. So asking people doing participation to think about their value base, to think about their assumptions about who's capable of making decisions and why is something quite important. And another slide that at some point when I read this in my first journeys around participation really helped flag things up for me about. This is about sort of participation in delivery, and I've been in a youth group where this process very much took place, from providing food for young people that they didn't have any say in, through to stepping back and young people doing the cooking themselves. It's a really nice book about participation in development, so you get loads of examples from all across the world. Stepping Forward Children and Young People's Participation, I can recommend it, and there are some examples from Brighton in it. So I'm going to talk about the horrible, messy, frustrating process of trying to work in a huge dinosaur of a service, the NHS. And how when you're in it and you're on 3 days a week for an entire county, do you deliver participation? And you can't possibly always be at the shiny bright number 8 on the ladder. In fact, if you're within reach of it, you're lucky. So I'm not going to describe an all amazing process. There are loads of things that are wrong with it, and we made lots of mistakes, and I'm hoping that is helpful to hear. We were given, we won an opportunity in CAMHS in East Sussex to be part of a national programme called Shared Decision Making that was led by the Anna Freud Centre. I forget how many other services also won the opportunity. It importantly gave us something that is a bit of a luxury. So we were a small team of people, including young people, but it involved a manager, not just me and a group of young people. So managers were involved, clinicians were involved, admin, young people, and a participation worker. So we were a team that had all the right bits in it, and I think that made a big difference. because it's really hard to affect change if all the people that hold the decision-making power aren't in the process with you, because often then you're ending up shouting about the change you want to happen based on the feedback you've got. But to have people in the room that have that decision-making power from the beginning was really helpful. We were asked to think about the process of coming to a service, a CAMHS service, in terms of 5 key areas of shared decision-making. And I'll just leave them up there. And one of the things that stuck with us all, I think, was the call from the Anna Freud Centre that, again, just getting young people in the room isn't enough. So in order to enable people to make informed choices and share decision-making with you, you need decision-making aids. You need visual prompts, because you've got lots of information in your head based on your training that somebody coming to see you doesn't necessarily have. Because you're not coming with a very painful experience that you're having to share with people that you already feel have much power over you, and in a context in which children aren't supposed to talk out of turn with adults. That's our upbringing, isn't it? You don't tell adults what to do, you don't disagree with them, so all of that is happening. So unless you create decision-making aids which make it clear what information you're talking about, break it up so that it's easily understood, can be referred back to, then you can't helpfully support somebody to make shared decision making. So we started by actually going back a stage, and we said as a team, and this didn't involve young people at this point, so there's number one, we're not doing shared decision making. As a team of workers, we said the only thing we thought we could affect some change on and was really important was the front house experience of coming to CAMHS. So we made that decision. And it was based on thinking, what could we actually achieve? We need to achieve something in this. Young people, we have a young people's participation group in CAMHS. It used to meet 3 times a month by meeting young people in 3 different locations across East Sussex, but as our participation work has grown, we've not been able to manage having 3 separate groups, so now we have one meeting a month for young people across the county. And young people in that group were invited to join us in our shared decision-making group, and 3 young people stepped forward to take part. So, there we are, thinking we've got a youth participation worker on board, we can do this, and we got together like that. And it was a bit like that. I don't think there was anybody at the head of the table, but we certainly were around a table, and I think we thought we were being very young person friendly. There were loads of post-it notes, and we all introduced ourselves, and we were all very nice people. But things we hadn't thought about. We were at the start of a project, and none of the workers in the room really knew where we were going, so it was really hard for young people to be with a group of people that didn't know where they were going and weren't really able to explain the messy process of, we're sort of just going to fumble through and see where we get to. We met in that kind of setting. Well, that's obviously not very good for young people. We don't, young people aren't spending their time sitting around tables. It's not how they would engage in their conversations. And there were lots of workers and only 3 of them, so it didn't work. So there was a problem. This slide is the wrong way around. So we use the fact that I was there. Instead, I met with each of those 3 young people on their own and gave them an opportunity on their own, as much time as they wanted to take, with huge sheets of paper to describe their getting to CAMHS journey. What did they identify as the processes that had gone on from feeling they first had an emerging issue that they wanted to discuss with somebody through to getting to CAMHS? Where did they feel there were decisions that were taken that they wanted to be involved in, or decisions that they should have been involved in but weren't, and we mapped it all out. And then I took that back to the worker group, and we looked at everything that had been said, and with our premise in mind that we wanted to work on the front of house, we started looking at, well, what things can we do with this feedback that would then shape the work. So we started doing things like rewriting letters, thinking about what was on our website. But one of the key bits that had come out was that young people were saying the first appointment at CAMHS is awful for them. As a service, they have a duty to find out lots of information. There's lots of risk information that we need to find out. And can you imagine, as a young person, it's the first time you feel like you're getting to the right person to talk about some really difficult issues, and you're met with a barrage of questions that you weren't prepared for. Some of them are quite searching. So we took that feedback and started looking for a way to help young people cope with that first appointment, given that the service had no choice, it has to ask those questions. So again, this is shared decision making. We couldn't take the questions away, but how can we make that process more participatory and less alienating for a young person? And so now I'm referring to the booklet that's on your table, the Getting to Know You booklet. So we use the feedback to think about how can we help young people understand what questions are going to come up? How can we help young people have more of a say, be ready to say something about those questions? So in the book you'll see there's lots of spaces for young people to, and all the way through it says draw or write. Don't feel like you have to write, draw something, stick something in, stick a photograph. And these are all the questions that are coming up in a first interview. It says at the beginning, if there's anything that's too difficult, don't fill it in. And that's proved really useful. So the feedback from clinicians using this is that sometimes young people don't fill the questions in, and that's revealing in and of itself. Sometimes a young person doesn't feel able to talk, but they've been able to fill in the booklet, so now their view is represented rather than that session just being conducted with maybe with the clinician and a parent. So I forget a stage. So young people, these 3 young people, have all been interviewed by themselves, describing their journey, and that's really informed the creation of this booklet. We went back to download with the prototype. It didn't look like this. It had lots of strange hand drawings that I'd done. And they all tried filling it in. They gave lots of feedback on, oh, I don't like the way that's worded. Could you change this? Could you change that? They gave some direction on how the pamphlet should look. And then we created a prototype with a graphic designer. Then, interestingly, we trialled it live. Now, this is another thing that being in this project allowed us to do. It didn't go rolling out. We tried it. So Warren was a clinician that trialled it. Ellie was a clinician that trialled it. So we did this process called Plan, Do, Study, Act. So plan to use the booklet, use the booklet in a session, log the age of that young person, the kind of presenting issue they were coming with, and try it out and ask that young person how it felt, ask yourself how it felt, write all of that down, and then we use that feedback to retweak the booklet. You start with 1 or 2, then you go on to 3 or 4. We invited a number of different clinicians all working in different styles of intervention, so from play therapists, psychologists. I don't know whether we used a psychiatrist. I don't know did we? So that allowed a broader spectrum of young people to get involved, and in fact young people that were our key audience, young people coming for the first time. So some other feedback that's happened, this is a booklet that's for 12 and unders, and we're just about to print a version that's been now created for 12 and overs. We've had some surprises, some happy surprises. So young people who previously took very little part in their first appointment at CAMHS, because they're filling in the booklet and now know what to expect, have started leading that session and saying, can we go to page 9? That's the bit I really want to talk to you about. And then the adults in the room can take more of a back seat. But I'd be lying to say that that's how every session with it goes. As I say, sometimes it's more a young person goes, I can't be involved in this, but they've commented in the book. Sometimes the feedback is, I don't like this book. This is awful, I don't like these questions, and that's part of our reviewing process. And then there's also at the back another resource that came out of this programme. How am I doing time-wise? I'm probably over.
You've got about 4 or 5 minutes.
4 or 5 minutes. I can do this in 4 or 5 minutes. So another tool that we developed was the opportunity for young people to start engaging in their session with their clinician about what they'd felt about the session. So again, out of these interviews, it became clear that whilst clinicians are warm and inviting people, and young people have thoughts about the session, the power dynamics are such that it is so difficult to tell your clinician who's offering you help, actually, I don't really like the way you're doing this, or I don't want to work in this way. And all through our participation work, young people keep saying, the invitation for my negative feedback has to be so strong from you, otherwise I can't give it. You have to make it obvious at every turn that you want my negative or constructive criticism, because it's so hard for me as a young person to offer that. We've developed loads of, I remember the service developed a postcard once, and the young people's reflection on that was, please can we have a free text box, because I'm well aware that of the constraints that you're under, and I want to contextualise my criticism with another comment about how good other aspects of it are. Young people are really insightful, really thoughtful, very empathic. So this tool was about creating an opportunity for young people to visually express whether things were going well. But the important thing about this tool is, as you'll notice, probably you're all thinking, well, but in a session you'd all go 4, because how can you say to your clinician they're at a naught for how much did you understand? And this is where it's about conversation and shared decision making, because I can, in a young person's group when I'm using it, say, wow, you put me as a 4, I put me as a 3, because I know I fumbled my way through that. I found it really difficult. And then they can look at you and smile and say, actually, yeah, you were even worse than that. And suddenly we're working together and making shared decision making. It went a stage further, so that we have a play therapist in the service that uses that, who said, well, that doesn't fit with the way I work. So she has it on a large mat so that young people can stand on it. And then she went a stage further than that, and she said, actually, I take the questions off, and I first ask these questions, and then we do the process again, and I ask the young person which questions they need to be asked, which is another way of them telling her what's more important to find out about. And I think, so there's a paper on making use of negative feedback which we can share. Young people in Download created a set of guidelines for how to use the bullseye, rather than it just being a paper that we gave out to all the clinicians. Young people, having said you have to invite negative feedback, also created visuals to put up in all the rooms about saying it's okay, please be honest, please, we are interested in knowing what your honest feedback is. I'll stop.
Thank you.